Will LA Kings fans learn to love Corey Perry? That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also one of the co-hosts of the Puck Podcast, a weekly podcast that recaps the past week in the NHL. We've been doing it for over 19 years. It's one of the longest running hockey podcasts out there. And I'm a passionate LA Kings fan, have been for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We continue our offseason look at the moves the LA Kings made at the recent free agency signing period, and there was no more controversial move than adding veteran forward Corey Perry. Yes, even more controversial than Cody Ceci, at least for some of us. Perry is joining the Kings to fill a certain role, and I will have to admit, as much as I don't like Corey Perry, the role he's being asked to fill is something he's done very well over his career and hopefully will do once again for the LA Kings. The players, or I should say the team, certainly could use a player who does what Corey Perry does, a veteran guy, a playoff performer, gritty, someone who other teams hate to play against, willing to do the dirty work. All that stuff is, things that Corey Perry does well, and that every team needs a player like that. The problem is we, mostly Kings fans, have loved to hate him for a long time, specifically when he was in Anaheim for 14 years. And then, of course, the last 2 years with the Edmonton Oilers, helping that team eliminate the Kings 2 years in a row, including this past year. And for some people, that's a lot to just move on from, even if we do feel that he could really help the team. It is a weird position to be in. One of my really good friends, Doug the Ducks fan, he's the co-host of the Puck Podcast with me. And we recorded a special episode, me as a Kings fan, he as a Ducks fan, talking about how we felt about Corey Perry joining the LA Kings. If you're interested in that, you can send me a message, lakingsextra@gmail.com, and I will direct you how you can watch that special episode, some of the extra content we're doing for this show and other places. But Doug thinks at the end of the season, I will have changed my mind about Corey Perry. I don't see it. I just don't see it. And I'm not one of those people who can't have their opinions changed. But it's going to be hard. Do I want to see him do well? Well, yes, because him doing well will help the Kings do well, I think. But I just can't see at this point in time embracing him. Now, maybe that'll change and we'll see. I will admit that hearing him speak to the media after agreeing to sign with the Kings, he said all the right things. And it felt like he was pretty sincere about what he said. If you did not hear or see the comments, he was asked why he decided to join the Kings. He said that LA has a good roster, that they're well constructed, tight defensively, got good goaltending, and that he hopes to come in and help the team get over the hump. And he just wants to come in and add to what is already here. He said that his relationship with new Kings GM Ken Holland did help him land in LA because Holland had brought him in Edmonton, one of many places that Perry has been since he left Anaheim. Perry was asked about his contract and the incentive bonuses in his contract. He said that it was tied to games played, playoff stuff, as he put it, and that it was very similar to recent contracts he's had and that he's had success with and the team has had success with. Perry did say that playing 20 years, that everybody knows his game, plays hard, goes to the dirty areas, gets in front of the net. He says, quote, "That's always been who I am," end quote. And that's who we expect him to be with the Kings. He was asked at the age of 40 what keeps him going. And he said, love of the game. He says he just loves being around the rink. He loves enjoying the day-to-day things that goes along with being an NHL player. And he said that they're going to have to cut his skates off of him before he decides to call it quits. So he doesn't sound like, how this year will be his last year. It doesn't sound like he wants that to be the case. We shall see whether it's one and done with the LA Kings. Who knows? But he's got the 1-year contract. He did laugh when he was asked about trying to win Kings fans over. Kings fans like me. And he said that he was going to let his play speak for itself. He acknowledged that he has had many battles against the Kings over his career in different places. He said that Kings fans were passionate. And he said, quote, "Now I have to get them on my side," end quote. Exactly how he's going to do that? Well, it's going to be to be successful, to play his role and help the Kings win. He did admit that he couldn't have imagined ever joining the Kings. You're not the only one, Corey. But he did say he was excited and looking forward to the challenge. He also said Drew Doughty had reached out to him, and he called Drew Doughty a good friend, which is a little surprising, I guess. But I guess that Drew and Corey Perry have probably played together, in certain events, maybe for Team Canada, would be my expectation of how they could be good friends. Perry was asked what he thought about Ducks fans and what they would think of him joining the Kings. He just said that he had been gone from Anaheim for 7 years and that he really didn't know anyone in that organization anymore, certainly no players. He did admit that coming back to Southern California was kind of a homecoming and said that his family was excited about it. He was asked if he could spice up the Kings-Ducks rivalry. He didn't really answer that question, but frankly, I hope so. I think that rivalry could use some spicing up. Certainly, it is a rivalry amongst the fans. I don't know that there's a lot of bad blood, though, between the players. We've talked about that before. And it's just, it's not, the rivalry could be better, but that goes hand in hand probably with both teams being good. And that hasn't happened a lot over the years, to be honest. When the Ducks have been really good, the Kings haven't been, and vice versa. And we all know they've only met in the playoffs one time in the history of both franchises. Perry was asked about putting on a Kings uniform and how that was going to feel. He said that it would take some getting used to, but that once camp comes around, he will be ready to go. He was asked specifically about a couple of the other newer Kings that he has played with before in other places. For example, I did not know that he and Joel Armia actually played on the same line in Montreal, where he was there for just 1 year. He said that he and Armia played on the same line in the playoffs. He said that they think the game alike. He said Armia is a really good penalty killer. He's got a good stick. He said he was smart and he was excited to be back with him. We believe that that is going to be the case, that Armia and Perry will play together on the Kings' fourth line, and the Kings' fourth line should be improved with those two guys, two big guys, two veteran guys that know their way around the rink, smart players. So hopefully Perry and Armia can team up again as they did in Montreal. They went to a Stanley Cup final. He also talked about Cody Ceci, who was a teammate of his in Edmonton, said that he's a great guy, plays hard, big body, and Perry said that he knows firsthand it's not easy to get to the front of the net when Cody Ceci is on the ice. So again, Corey Perry's saying all the right things. Certainly, again, seems sincere, I have to admit. I respect how much he loves the game. I did like him saying that they're going to have to basically cut the uniform off him. I think he does clearly love hockey. And in a weird way, I think that comes across in the things he does on the ice, in his willingness to do those dirty things, to do those hard things, to be a very competitive person, which he clearly is, to last this long and do all the things necessary to get yourself and your body ready for another NHL season. It is going to be weird. There's no doubt about it. Seeing Corey Perry play for the Kings will be very weird. And I can't imagine right now changing the way I feel about him. But as I said, I don't believe I'm someone who can't consider, having his mind changed about things. I am kind of hard-headed too, though. Ask my wife. But we'll see. Going into it, I'm not happy about it. I'm hoping, though, that he does his job and that he helps the Kings do well. Whether I actually ever really embrace him as a King, that's going to take a lot. I can't envision it, but like I said, we'll see what happens as the season goes along. If he plays well and helps the Kings win, that's obviously the first step on maybe embracing Corey Perry. It doesn't sound, I don't even like saying that. Coming up next, we're going to talk about some news that came out the other day around the Kings, about Vladislav Gavrikov signing elsewhere, comments about Brant Clark next season, and Adrian Kempe getting a contract. Lots of news and notes about the Kings coming up next on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It is easy to use, they're fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open up the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, if you're a fan of the entire NHL, you probably know, and I've referenced it a few times before, about the 32 Thoughts podcast. Elliot Friedman, I believe the most plugged-in hockey insider that's out there, is one of the co-hosts of it. He's been doing it for a long time with various different other co-hosts, and they recently dropped their final podcast of the season before taking a break. And in this final podcast, they touched on every NHL team, obviously including the Los Angeles Kings. I did want to touch on some things that were said in that podcast. And the first thing Elliot Friedman commented on was Ken Holland and what he has done in a short amount of time as Kings GM. He said that Holland did the same thing in Edmonton, bringing in veterans, improving the team around the edges, as he called it, end quote. Now, hopefully, Holland can have the success with Edmonton, with the LA Kings, I should say, as he did with Edmonton, but it's a different situation. When he took over the Oilers, they were not a playoff team. The season before he became GM of the Oilers, they finished 7th in the Pacific, and they had missed the playoffs for 2 years in a row. So different situation. He was trying to make that team a competitive playoff team. The Kings are already that. He's trying to get them to the next stop, the next level, over the hump, whatever you want to call it. But he's doing similar things that he did in Edmonton now in LA, according to Elliot Friedman. I think he's right. And, they never won a Stanley Cup, but every year Holland was the GM in Edmonton. They made the playoffs. They finished second in the division every year. And then his final year with the Oilers, not this past season, but obviously the year before, they've lost in 7 games in the Stanley Cup final. So hopefully Ken Holland can work some of his magic as he did in Edmonton to make the Kings a similar type team that can make deep runs in the playoffs, which is obviously why he was hired. Now, Friedman also made a solid point, and something that I've talked about that I didn't quite equate to. It's similar, but Friedman said that he was concerned about the age of the Kings, that a lot of players had a lot of mileage on them, and he was concerned if they could stay healthy. Now, I've said I was concerned about the Kings because I don't think they're particularly deep, and I find it hard to believe, although I'm hopeful, that the Kings can be as healthy as they were a year ago, because they were, other than Drew Doughty, they were relatively healthy all season long. Yeah, a few guys missed here and there, but by and large, other than Doughty, they didn't have any major injuries, and that's very rare. for any NHL team. I never thought about the mileage part of it, but obviously the Kings have added some older players, none older than Corey Perry, 40 years old, over 1,300 NHL games. Brian Dumoulin's 33. That's not ancient, but it's not young. Joel Armia is 32. Cody Cece's 31. But I will say, while I get his point, all those guys have been incredibly durable of late. As a matter of fact, of a possible 328 games that they could have played last season, those four players combined for 327 games played. Corey Perry missed one game last year. Brian Dumoulin missed two. Joel Armia missed one. Cody Cece actually played 3 extra games because he was traded from San Jose to Dallas, and apparently that added up to him getting extra games. So he helped that total out a bit. But clearly Cody Cece didn't miss a game all year, played extra hockey. So yes, the mileage on those guys that have been added is not insignificant. But at least recently, all those guys were absolute workhorses. So hopefully that stays the same with the LA Kings. Friedman also talked about Brandt Clarke. Thought he had some really interesting things to say. Nothing earth-shattering, but it echoed what I've been saying when it comes to Brandt Clarke this year, and comments Ken Holland has made as well, that it's time for both the Kings and Brandt Clarke to take a step forward. I had an episode weeks ago that was, I think I titled the little thumbnail, "Let Clarke Cook." The Kings asked him to be a more responsible defensive player. They asked him to prove to them that he could be a solid defensive player at this level, maybe sacrificing some of the creative things that he wants to do. I think Brandt Clarke accepted that challenge, if you want to call it that. I think he showed that he can be a reliable, good defensive player at the NHL level. Look, he's not an NHL player, or he's not a highly thought of prospect because he's a defensive defenseman. But it doesn't mean that they can't expect him to play his role and to be responsibly defensively. But at the same time, they kept him for a reason. They drafted him for a reason. And it was because of his offensive skill. It was because of his creativity. It's something that the Kings don't have a lot of on their defense. And they decided to pick Brandt Clarke over Brock Faber when they made the trade to get Kevin Fiala from Minnesota. I think that the Wild said, we have to have one of these guys. And the Kings said, okay, well, we'll give up Faber because he's not as offensively creative. He's not as potentially special as Brandt Clarke is. Faber is a very solid young defenseman that's going to be on their blue line for decades to come. Clarke, though, has a bigger upside, and he needs to take a step this coming season, and the Kings need to allow him to take a step this coming season. I think he'll be on that second pairing all year long, at least running the second power play unit. And I think he's earned the right to be allowed to have a little more freedom. And Elliot Friedman certainly talked about that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. He also talked about Adrian Kempe and him needing a new contract. Kempe is going into this coming season, final year of his contract. He'll be a UFA at the end of it. And we know how the Kings have done with unrestricted free agents recently and guys walking for nothing. I do not anticipate that happening. I do anticipate Adrian Kempe getting locked up beyond this coming season at some point before the upcoming season starts. To quote the movie Rounders, pay that man his money. He has earned it. Adrian Kempe has been a bargain for the LA Kings at $5.5 million per season. He is probably the most dangerous and consistent offensive weapon the Kings have. He is one of the, if not the best player on the team. He does it all. He can play on the power play, even strength. He could kill penalties if they asked him to. He's a very responsible defensive player. He's worked hard on that side of his game, and I think he is very underrated in that regard. He plays with an edge. He plays with a swagger. Not a lot of Kings players have that. that spark. Obviously, you can probably tell by the way I'm talking, I'm a big fan of Adrian Kempe, but he's earned that praise, and he has now earned the opportunity to get paid. And the Kings need to take care of him. He's going to turn 29 in September, so I don't know if he's going to get the 8-year deal or not that the Kings could give him. This is the last year, by the way, that teams can give out 8-year contracts. Going on after next season, the maximum contracts you can give out is a 7-year deal. So this will be the last time he could get that. I'm sure he wants to probably cash in on that. I think Adrian Kempe would love to start and end his career as an LA King. And obviously he's still very productive. 28 goals last year. It is the fourth season that he's had 28 or more goals. Actually, he had 35 goals last season, excuse me. But he's had 28 or more goals each of the last 4 seasons. Tied with Kevin Fiala last year for the team leading goals with 35. Back-to-back 70-point seasons as well. So again, he's earned it. He has earned his money. Done everything the Kings have asked him to do. And I think if he were on another team that had a more offensive style, he's a guy who's an 80, 90-point guy. So paying him as such, I don't think is necessarily out of bounds, if you will. So we'll see. I don't know if he'll get the 8-year deal. I could absolutely see him getting $8 to $9 million a year. I think he's earned it, like I said. But the bottom line is, Ken Holland, don't let this drag out. I know he has said that once he took care of everything with free agency, and I certainly do believe that the Kings are done with any offseason moves, that it's time to take care of Adrian Kempe. So let's not drag this on. Let's get this done before the start of the season. Also, real quick, about Vladislav Gavrikov. A lot of questions about him going to New York. Elliot Friedman said that he believed that the Kings and Rangers were talking about a sign and trade, but ultimately it fell through. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you guys can educate me. I still don't understand why the Rangers would give up anything for a player that it seemed for all the world was going to sign there anyway. So why would they give something up for a sign and trade unless they wanted to give him an 8th year? Maybe that's possible. That does make a little bit of sense. But we've talked about all these small reasons that may have added up to a big reason for Vladislav Gavrikov not coming back to LA. We talked about the climate in New York being closer to what he grew up with in Russia, New York being closer to Russia for when he travels back home, maybe getting to play a top pairing situation, which he wasn't going to have in LA. And there was one other thing that Friedman brought up, but he wasn't talking about Gavrikov. He was talking about Nikolai Ehlers, who signed with Carolina coming from Winnipeg. And apparently one of the reasons that Ehlers wanted to sign there was the travel that Winnipeg has. And, being an East Coast team, the travel is cut down a lot. Well, if you play on the West Coast, that's a ton of travel. And I know, you're not going to shed any tears for these guys flying, first class private planes catered and everything else. But being in an airplane for hours and hours and hours, still, if you can choose to not do it or have an option of not doing it, you can understand why a player might want to factor that in as well. So maybe that also factored in with Vladislav Gavrikov. When you play in LA and you go on road trips, there's a lot of air travel. Not so much when you play in a place like New York and you go to New Jersey or Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. It's all right there. So maybe that's another reason as well. Another log on the fire for why Vladislav Gavrikov signed with the Rangers. All right, up next, what would the Kings roster look like if it was only made up of current NHL players that the Kings drafted? We'll explain and talk about that next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. So it's the off season and we have time to do some different things, maybe some little kind of research projects. And I saw something recently about the Buffalo Sabres. They've missed the playoffs 14 years in a row, but they've had a couple of players that they drafted win Stanley Cups recently, Jack Eichel in Vegas and Sam Reinhart in Florida. And it was asked, or it was kind of theorized, that if they just held on to their draft picks and didn't trade them away, what kind of team would the Buffalo Sabres actually be? And of course, it got me thinking about the LA Kings roster. What kind of roster could the Kings put together if it was made up entirely of current NHL players that at one point were drafted by the LA Kings. So I did a little research on it. I'm going to share it with you. Hope you'll find it interesting. And there were even some players I found that I didn't even know the Kings had drafted because they played their whole careers with other teams. But here's the rules for this. All right. You have to have played at least one NHL game last season, and you have to be available to play in the NHL this coming season. For example, I didn't include Rasmus Kupari on this list, even though he was drafted by the Kings, but he's signed to play overseas. So he won't be in the NHL most likely next year. All right. So here is my starting lineup of forwards, players who are in the NHL currently and were drafted by the LA Kings. Obviously, it's going to include some current LA Kings. And the top line has Anze Kopitar, first-round pick in 2005, 11th overall. He is centering Adrian Kempe, first-round pick by the Kings in 2014, 29th overall. And on the other wing, Gabe Vilardi of the Winnipeg Jets, first-round pick 2017, 11th overall. So pretty good top line. Second line would be centered by Braden Shen, the captain of the St. Louis Blues, once upon a time a Kings first-round pick in 2009, fifth player taken overall. I always liked Braden Shen. I would have loved to have seen him play longer with the LA Kings, but he was part of the Mike Richards trade. Mike Richards came over and helped the Kings win 2 Stanley Cups, so you can't complain too much about that. On the wings, you've got Tyler Toffoli, who won a cup with the Kings in 2014, now with the San Jose Sharks. He was a second-round pick of the Kings in 2010, 47th overall. And then on the other wing, I've got Alex Laferriere, third-round pick in 2020, 83rd overall. And you might think, wow, Alex Laferriere, that high? Yes. Quentin Byfield, I guess you could have put Quentin Byfield on the wing, but I got Quentin Byfield as the third-line center, first-round pick of the Kings in 2020, second overall. On his wings, we've got Tanner Pearson, now of the Winnipeg Jets. He was a first-round pick of the Kings in 2012, 30th overall. On the other wing, Michael Amadio, now playing for the Ottawa Senators. He was a third-round pick of the Kings in 2014, the 90th overall pick. And the Kings' fourth line of players who played in the NHL last year and are expected to play again this year. You've got Nick Dowd at center. He was drafted by the Kings in the 7th round of 2009, 198th player taken overall. He's with the Washington Capitals, played all 82 games for the Caps last season, so a veteran fourth-line guy. The wings are Alex Turcotte, first-round pick of the Kings in 2019, 5th overall. And the other one is a guy I didn't know the Kings had drafted, Mikey Eyssimont, who played last year with the Kraken and the Lightning. He's now on the Boston Bruins. He was a 5th-round pick of the Kings in 2016, 142nd pick overall. So again, my forwards of Kings players who the Kings drafted, played in the NHL last year and are expected to play in the NHL next season: Kopitar, Kempe, Vilardi, Shen, Laferriere, Toffoli, Byfield, Amadio, and Pearson, Dowd, Turcotte, and Eyssimont. As far as other players who are in the league that play forward and were drafted by the Kings and are still around, Nick Delorier of the Flyers, another guy I did not know the Kings drafted. He was a third-round pick in 2009, 84th overall. Played 31 games last year for the Flyers. He was part of a trade from LA to Buffalo for defenseman Braden McNabb back in the day. Jarrett Anderson-Dolan is still kicking around a little bit for the Winnipeg Jets, second-round pick in 2017, 41st overall selection. He played in 7 games for the Jets last season and could play in a couple of games for them this season. And then Arthur Kaliev, you may not know, he's now joined the Ottawa Senators, had that brief stint with the Rangers, did not work out. He's now trying to land a job in Ottawa, second-round pick of the Kings in 2017, 33rd overall. You've also got some current Kings, Samuel Hellenius, Akil Thomas, Andre Lee. All those guys played at least a few games last year and could play some games this year. And then Trevor Lewis is a little bit in limbo. He's a free agent, hasn't been signed. Don't think the Kings are going to re-sign him, but we'll see. First-round pick of the Kings back in 2006, 17th overall. So I think the forward group is okay. Defense is where it looks really good for the Kings. My top pairing for the Kings as far as players they drafted who are still playing in the NHL, got Brock Faber, Minnesota Wild, first-round pick, 2020, 45th overall. He was a part of the Kevin Fiala trade, as I mentioned. And then Mikey Anderson, of course, still on the Kings, 4th-round pick, 2017, 103rd pick overall. Then you've got Drew Doughty on my second pairing, first-round pick in 2008, 2nd overall. And Jake Middleton of the Minnesota Wild, drafted by the Kings in the 7th round in 2014, 210th overall. He is by far the latest drafted player on this list and the latest drafted current NHLer that the Kings had drafted. Played 67 games with the Minnesota Wild last year. And according to Puckpedia, he and Brock Faber are the top pairing for the Minnesota Wild. So 2 players the Kings drafted are a top pairing for another NHL team right now. My third pairing would be Eric Chernak of Tampa Bay, Kings' second-round pick in 2015, 43rd overall. He was traded to Tampa Bay in the Ben Bishop deal. Then you've got Matt Roy for the Washington Capitals, 7th-round pick in 2015, 194th overall would be also one of my starting Ds. So pretty strong group of Kings drafted defensemen that you could have on a team. Brock Faber, Mikey Anderson, Jake Middleton, Drew Doughty, Matt Roy, Eric Cernak. Certainly Brant Clark would be in the mix as well. And then you've got some other guys. Jordan Spence now in Ottawa, Jacob Moverar with the Kings, Colin Miller with Winnipeg. I did not know the Kings drafted him. Played 60 games for Winnipeg last year. He was a 5th-round pick of the Kings in 2012, 151st overall pick. And then Helge Grans for the Philadelphia Flyers. Only played 6 games for Philadelphia last season. 2nd-round pick in 2020, 35th overall selection. But he was sent to Philadelphia as part of the Cal Peterson contract ejection. And he may have a bigger role with the Flyers coming up this year. We'll close it out with the goalies. And it's not a good group. And no disrespect to Jonathan Quick, but if this was the guy you were starting as your number 1 goalie right now, that's not a great option. But Jonathan Quick with the New York Rangers, drafted 3rd by the Kings, 3rd round by the Kings in 2005, 72nd overall. He's our starting goalie because the only other drafted Kings goalie that has played a game in the NHL and may play another NHL game coming up, maybe, is Matt Villalta of the Utah Mammoth. He played 1 game for Utah last season. He was a 3rd-round pick of the Kings in 2017, 72nd overall. And that's it. There are no other goaltenders that were drafted by the Kings that played at least 1 game in the NHL last year and could play a game next season other than Jonathan Quick and Matt Villalta. You might think, what about Cal Peterson, who's now with the Minnesota Wild organization? Well, the Kings didn't draft him, and he didn't play any games in the NHL last year. The only other goaltender that I think is still active in North America that the Kings drafted is Jacob Ingham, 6th-round pick in 2008, 175th overall, played 5 games with the Ontario Reign last year, was mostly with the ECHL's Greenville Swamp Rabbits, which is one of the great names in all of minor league hockey. So I hope you found that at least somewhat informative and entertaining. 32 players that the Kings drafted played at least 1 game in the NHL last year and could play another NHL game coming up this season, if not more. 19 forwards, 11 defensemen, 2 goalies. Of the 32 players, 11 of them were 1st-round picks, 7 were 2nd-round picks, 5 3rd-round picks, 3 were 4th-round picks, 2 5th-round picks, no 6th-round picks, and 4 7th-round picks that the Kings drafted are currently playing in the NHL. So decent forward group, very strong defensive core, I would say, and the goaltending, not so much. Like I said, I hope you found that a little bit interesting. It's the off season, so we can do some little research projects like this. If you have any ideas for something like this, feel free to pass it along. But that was a little project I did, and I thought I would share that with you guys. So again, hopefully you found that somewhat entertaining. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, we have a special LA Kings New York Rangers crossover show coming up. I talk with John Chick, the host of Locked On New York Rangers. We talk about Vladislav Gavrikov. We talked about what could have been with a Keandre Miller trade. We talk about possible tampering with the Rangers and Vladislav Gavrikov. Unfortunately, I forgot to ask him about Jonathan Quick, but it's a good interview. We'll have that for you coming up on tomorrow, a special show. Also, again, if you want some special content, send me an email, lakingsextra@gmail.com. If you want to get an email in for our fan feedback show or for any other reason, the regular email address is lockedoneddie, EDDIE@gmail.com. Always welcome your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. And stay connected with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Locked On LA Kings, and on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnLA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.